Recently, I did an episode about retcons on my podcast, Star Wars Loose Cannon, and I want to give you all a recap. As you probably all know, Star Wars has a lot of retcons. I'm sure that's no surprise to just about anyone, but you might not realize that so much of Star Wars content in general is actually a retcon. And what is a retcon? A retcon is retroactive continuity. It is an alteration of previously established content or facts in the continuity of a fictional work. So this could be any other franchise like Terminator, which we talked about on our show, or Dragon Ball Z, which is one of my favorite franchises, which also has a lot of retcons. There are a lot of different reasons for retcons. It can free up writers to have more creative freedom with the property. It might get red tape out of the way for them to do things, create various content without it kind of having, bumping shoulders with so many different ideas and facts and timelines and things like that. It also allows them to revise things and resolve sometimes just straight up errors in continuity. Sometimes things don't actually add up. So there are actually four different types of retcons that I want to talk to you guys about. The first one is a visual or physical retcon. This is a retcon where mainly it is where films are being edited and things on screen are being changed. So this comes up a lot in the remasters, but also even after the original Star Wars was released, immediately subsequent versions of the film came out with different edits. And things like very small, like a placement of where R2-D2 is on screen, to Han, getting shot at by Greedo, although he misses in the altered versions or in the remasters. So this does change the content a lot, and it does have ramifications, but it is a physical retcon because it is changing things that are on screen. Other examples of it, besides Han shooting first, whereas actually in the original film, he's the only one to shoot. He doesn't actually get shot at. He's kind of gets threatened by Greedo and he just shoots him. So that's a big misnomer that a lot of people don't understand. The second kind of retcon is unfilled gaps that get filled in. This is a little bit of a fuzzier category because technically it doesn't disagree with other content, but it does really change things for current content and as well as creating big stories that previously did not exist. So Rogue One in itself as a movie is a unfilled gap that gets filled in. So the Death Star having an exploit in its design so that it could be destroyed by the rebels and purposefully being designed that way by Galen Erso, that is an example of this because this idea was not in place at all when the movie first came out. Also, most of the Star Wars TV shows, the Clone Wars TV show, in Rebels and the live action shows, those are all unfilled gaps that get filled in. They weren't originally planned as part of George Lucas's world. The third example of retcons in Star Wars is we didn't give you all the information. This might be one of the most classic, other than our first example. So this is like we're not changing the story. We just didn't tell you everything there was to know. So there are things that happen in the first 2 and 3 movies where the writing is definitely not indicating something, but it ends up being changed later on. So, for instance, Obi-Wan says that Darth Vader killed Luke's father. Obviously, we all know this. And then later on, he says, well, I didn't lie. It is true from a certain point of view. But it's also the fact that Darth Vader wasn't originally written as Luke's father. So that's one example. Another one is Luke and Leia being siblings. I believe that in the first two movies, that even in An Empire Strikes Back, they definitely were not written as siblings. And it wasn't until Return of the Jedi that they ended up being brother and sister. They were not written as brother and sister all along. A lot of people think that it was just the first movie that they weren't brother and sister, but from what I've read, it's actually not until the third movie that this decision was made. There are other couple examples too, like midichlorians being part of Star Wars and are what make up the Force and potency in the Force. And then Boba Fett having lived, and also the third sister surviving the Order 66 at the Jedi Temple. Those are all things that we didn't get all the information on. Lastly is the biggest one, or at least the most consequential and probably most controversial category, which is what we call, and thanks to my co-host Zach Wildman for coming up with these categories. And this last one is called Never Mind, We're Changing Shit Up. This is the hardest retcon of them all, whereas a lot of the other ones we could probably call soft retcons. So this one is not canceling out maybe a plot or something outright, which obviously it doesn't tell, it's not good. We all know it's not good storytelling if someone just says, hey, it turns out that movie didn't happen. That doesn't happen in Star Wars. It does happen in other continuity where they just say, hey, we're going to continue on from movie 1 and 2, but movies 3 and 4, that continuity no longer exists. That's not quite the level of where Star Wars gets, but there are things that do kind of undo things from the past that we can take big note of. The most egregious examples probably that are top of mind for people are Legends. All the Legends books, all that material, video games, things like that, all are, after the acquisition that Disney made, are all no longer canon. And that in itself is a retcon. So that's, for a lot of fans, they're still angry about that. Personally, I don't care that much most of the time, although I do have some favorite, of course, my favorite things I'm kind of wish were part of the canon, but I can understand why they're not. But Legends, getting rid of Legends itself is sort of a retcon. The movie Han Solo, for example, could be considered a retcon. It does a couple of different things, for instance, how he got his name, but for me, the biggest one was his redemption arc starting a lot earlier in life. So he really, as you saw him as a man, a character on screen, he was a scoundrel who became honorable by helping out his friends in the rebellion. That's essentially his character arc. He became a better person, and he was servicing a cause greater than himself for once. That's essentially the story of him. But the movie Han Solo has him being more of a redemptive character from a much earlier part of life. In fact, you could argue that he never really was this scoundrel type person, but he was just in a bad situation and had to make the best of it. So I think that's kind of a retcon. But overall, like there are definitely like specific things in the movies where, towards the end, he agrees to kind of help, or he wants to help the rebels. There's a section of rebels that he decides to help. So I think that's a case of retconning there. There are a lot of retcons in The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker as well from the newer canon. For instance, Snoke, we all know that character did not end up being the big threat, the big bad guy that we all believed he was set up to be in the later movies. We also learned that through The Last Jedi that Luke's lightsaber, or Anakin's lightsaber, was not really that important at all because Luke kind of tossed it to the side. Another thing from the Rise of Skywalker for me that really stood out was R2D2 had his memory wiped from all of the events of The Last Jedi. And that to me was sort of an allegory for how the fans like kind of are supposed that basically kind of like it's a meta for like, yeah, we kind of want to forget a lot of things that happen in this movie. And we want you to forget about it too. So those are some of the biggest retcons that we talked about in our podcast. And if you want to listen to the full episode, it's on all the major podcast platforms such as Spotify or Apple Podcasts. But you can find us at Star Wars Loose Cannon. Just search that into any podcast platform, and you'll find us, and you'll find the full episode. So if you want more of this content, head over there. But for now, thanks for listening.